now tuned in to the Cold Hard Truth, Cayman's #1 hard-hitting live podcast show, where we feature some straightforward conversations on political, social, and celebrity news and all things happening in the Cayman Islands and around the world. This show was created to give the people a voice and a means of being involved and informed without any filters. Sometimes it gets crazy, but we always keep it real. We bring you the tea, piping hot, so grab your favorite beverage and join the conversation via WhatsApp at 324-1612. Email tips at CaymanMarlRoad.com. Now, here's your host, Sandy Hill, broadcasting live from the beautiful Cayman Islands.
Video.
Woohoo.
Actually,
Me and the kids.
you and the kids
Great.
who were dressed up.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember Captain America.
No.
No,
Darth
what?
Vader and Owlette.
And what was the other one?
Darth Vader,
I know Darth Vader.
Owlette.
Owlette?
PJ Masks.
No,
You haven't
not there yet.
You haven't got onto the PJ.
No, I've heard that
the
somebody else
PJ
said that.
masks were
Somebody
PJ
else said that.
masks. Because nighttime is
we're-
the right time
Yeah,
to fight crime.
Miles isn't there yet.
Okay,
All right.
well, you'll know the song soon.
Yeah. All right, it's 7:26 right now.
Big news. I have some important news for you.
Interesting news.
It's Blake and Aaron's Spilling the Tea with Sandy.
Cayman's top news headlines of the day from CMR.
Oh,
Good morning, Sandy.
Hey, good morning, Blake and Aaron. Good morning, everyone. I had to
morning.
laugh with Aaron just talking about PJ Masks.
yeah. Do you know the song too?
Oh, yes. We've gone through that phase for sure.
Oh yeah. It's it's actually a pretty tolerable show.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I enjoyed watching it, actually.
Yeah.
I must
Anyway,
say.
so
How was the weekend?
Pretty good.
Yeah. Have some trick-or-treaters?
No, actually, we didn't have any. Not a single person knocked on our door.
Okay.
And we decided to, again, just because of the whole COVID situation, that we'd have 2 chocolates each, my daughter and I. So she was trying to negotiate a third one. And in the name of Halloween, and I said, no, 2 is plenty. So yeah.
So you just eat
it's hard to limit them because once
Yeah.
they get the taste of it, it's
sugar.
yeah.
I know.
Yummy.
I know.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right. So what happened over the weekend? Any good news stories we need to chat about?
A couple things. So we're waiting on the I guess it's public health who's making this decision. I'm not 100% sure, to make some changes to the reporting protocol.
Mhm.
So that's something that we are anxiously waiting on to hear what that will be. I suspect they're not going to be reporting totals every day. That's my suspicion.
Why do you
I think
suspect
they're
that?
just overwhelmed by being forced to have to do it every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw that on Friday, we finally got the results that were due on Thursday. So technically, we're still at least a day behind.
Right. Well, now we'll get
essentially
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Yeah. So basically, they said, on Friday, don't expect any more results until Monday to kind of manage expectations. So I think that's interesting. And we kind of got like partial results initially. Like we didn't know like the vaccinated versus unvaccinated of those who were infected. So I'm very, very interested to see what they're going to come up with next in terms of, what the protocol will be.
Yeah. I mean,
So it's a lot to keep up with. And I think that hopefully they're learning some important lessons ahead of the November 20th opening. They obviously need more staff, and it's not just public health, it's also the private institutions that are involved in the process. So Doctors Hospital was inundated with individuals, and people are still showing up, and Doctors Hospital was telling them, oh, you don't have an appointment. It was like, what?
Yeah, but the public health must have known the demand it would cause once we got to this phase, right?
I don't think they were ready, which means they probably didn't appreciate exactly how many people would be seeking to get tested. So yeah, I don't know.
Good morning, Everlyn. She said,
Yes,
good morning.
everybody loves to see you guys. So we got Joy already. Over 128 people online saying good morning.
Any other crazy news? I know it's November 1st. We 29 days now to the end of hurricane season.
I was thinking about that this morning, that we've actually done pretty well. So fingers crossed that we can continue to go through the last month unscathed. There was a tennis court and a car that collided with each other this morning in Bodden Town.
Oh man, those tennis courts jump out just like the light poles and telephone poles.
Yeah, exactly. And there was
I cannot make this stuff up. I said to my husband, get on the road 2 minutes earlier because there's a accident in the tennis court. He was like, what?
And there was a wreck at Altice roundabout.
Was there?
Last night,
yeah.
Yeah, sweet car. And then apparently at about 4:30 this morning, there was another accident in South Sound that took out part of the stone at Casaluna on South Church Street. Again.
Yeah.
The residents in South Church Street continue to ask for the RCIPS to put some real traffic presence, some traffic cops there, because they really have an issue with people speeding on what is supposed to be, a very narrow road, and the speed limit isn't that high in South Sound. So,
but they go down that road. I mean, I lived at Caribbean Paradise for like 7 years, and you could just hear them all night long, all day. The motorbikes too. I mean, they're going up. They're not going the speed limit because you don't make that noise going the speed limit.
Send Operation Quaker over.
Yes.
I mean, they did have some police presence.
Did they name that Quaker because it's supposed to have you shaking your boots?
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know where
I remember Operation Christmas Cracker.
The Christmas Cracker one was still the funniest.
That's funny.
I like
Our condolences to the family of the Director of Library Services, Mr. Paul Robinson. He died unexpectedly yesterday. And so all public libraries will be closed today in observance of them losing their chief guy over there. So sad situation.
I don't know.
Yeah.
How did he pass away?
They just said unexpectedly. So unfortunately, I don't really have any details. So yeah.
I wanted to go back really quick to just the fact that hurricane season is ending. There is a storm in the Atlantic. Not going to be a factor for us, but Tropical Storm Wanda. So we're
still out there.
We're at the end of the alphabet at the moment with Wanda.
How did we get there? I didn't hear about any other storms.
We've had a lot.
Like you just don't pay attention when it doesn't impact you, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, Sandy, have a great day.
Yes, we'll certainly keep you updated in terms of the numbers. We expect the numbers to be high, obviously, but yeah.
And you can catch CMR right now live on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
All right, CMR.
All right, folks. So good morning to everyone. Hope you guys are doing well. Happy Monday. Rewind Monday. So good morning to Felicia. Good morning. Okay, Ja, I don't know what kind of moment you're having this morning. It's a little bit too early for the craziness. We need you to tune it down a little bit because we do not even know what you're talking about. But when you start coming out with these crazy comments on a Monday morning before 8 o'clock, we really not feeling it. Can we not get through a Monday morning without craziness? Carol says there's also fender bender on West Bay Road. A car crashed into a wall at the top of West Bay Road. The top of West Bay Road. Where do you consider the top of West Bay Road, by the way? Pretty crazy. My glasses are a little bit dirty today. Gina, good morning. Let me see if I can clean them. Olivia's here. Blissful Powell. Wee. So, Josh says, I'm not crazy. Read it to the world. I'm sure they can read for themselves. And since we don't really know what you're talking about, this is where we're having a hard time understanding what is going on here. From West Bay, lives in West Bay, went to Cayman Islands High School, it says, studied math and English. Owner of WSS Records Cayman. Okay. Right. Okay. Have you tried contacting the police? I'm not saying you're police. I'm not saying you're a liar. I'm saying you're sounding a little bit crazy. Come to Simeon Crescent, Mount Pleasant, West Bay. Yeah, no thanks. It's okay. It's legit okay. I would suggest calling the police. They must be able to help you. Blissful Powell. Britta, Miss Sue. Anthony says on Zuckerberg's Meta talking crazy. Yes, did we talk about this last week? So let's talk about it. It's Rewind Monday, so we're going to rewind it a little bit and talk about some of what transpired over the weekend. So let's get into that first and foremost. And then we can talk about some of the other things that we might have missed, including the fact that Facebook has been renamed. The corporate entity has been renamed to Meta. And we'll talk about some of those things. So I want to get this conversation really, I guess this might take a minute to discuss, right? So late on Friday afternoon, we started to receive numerous messages about a young lady who was allegedly wearing what's often termed as blackface. Now, I don't know that they, what was said, and we never actually used that term in our post even, but what was said was that this young lady was dressed in a particular way on Cultural Day. And so we received a video that had been recorded, obviously by another student at the school. And, we posted that video. I'm going to talk about kind of why we posted it, but we posted that video and asked a few questions in terms of who's responsible for this, right? So one of the things that's important to understand about CMR that perhaps distinguishes us from traditional newspapers. So when I say traditional newspapers, I'm thinking of like the Compass, maybe even CNS, and to be honest, probably even Luke Cayman and all the others, right? We actually, anything that's quote unquote trending on social media, we are going to discuss. So trending means it is a topic of discussion and it is going viral. And there's no doubt by the time that we even got a hold of the story, that it had been posted on numerous social media platforms, and it was gaining a lot of traction in terms of a discussion in the community. In addition to that, we'd been contacted by several persons. I'm going to just show you, here's a thing that someone was like, check this out, what's going on at prep school. And I want to bring the conversation back to prep school because this is really where the conversation is. It isn't even in some regards about this young lady per se. But there was this, and the other one that we received was from a website that actually had it up. I'm just trying to find my phone actually. Give me 1 second. So the other page that had it up, and again, I don't necessarily want to show the photo again, but this other page called, let me just see what the heck they're called now. Spook something or another. They had it up as well. And they said their caption was, so Cayman Prep has Culture Day today and take a wild guess at what this kid went as. And then, the other social media page, what's the name of their page again? Cayman Waste also had it up as well. And I can't recall what Cayman Waste comment was. So for us, it was a trending topic in the community that was obviously gaining extreme traction. And when you first look at the image, it does give you the perception that if you believed that this was Cultural Day, that maybe this was cultural misappropriation. That was the initial impression I think that pretty much everyone got, right? Now, normally we have a policy of not posting children. And the only reason that an exception was made in this case is because she was wearing a face covering. For us, that amounted to a filter. I think in retrospect, it probably still wasn't enough of a filter, or it's just one of those situations where all the kids at the school already know exactly who it was because it was already circulating amongst their group of individuals, right? The initial comment was in relation to who would have allowed this to happen. Never, ever in a million years blaming the child. But was this a situation where she left home looking like this? Was this a situation where she's walked around campus looking like this and teachers, administrators, nobody looked at this and go, ooh, this could certainly be interpreted in a particular way? So we were then contacted by a few people. Some people said she was in a play that late that day, and she was supposed to be dressed as a horse. Somebody else said, her mom, I think, said she was supposed to be dressed as Beauty, not Beauty and the Beast, Beauty and the Beast, the Beast, and I think it's Beauty and the Beast, whatever. and she was supposed to be dressed as a beast. And there was actually more to the costume that was apparent from that video, that in fact she had like fangs on and other things that would make people understand that it wasn't just a colored face. You know, I still thought that an adult teacher would have looked at that and said, you know what, young lady, have you taken the rest of your costume off? Go ahead and wash off your face as well. That didn't happen. And other students saw it, and they obviously, for whatever reason, saw something there that they thought, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And so they were the ones who put it out there with the voice note and the tag that was actually in the video. We didn't doctor the video in any way, shape, or form. And that's why sometimes, you know, people are like, oh, well, can you cover this person's face and can you do this? I think that fundamentally there's something wrong with us trying to doctor something, because then that begs questions like, well, why did you doctor it? You know, is there something else in this photo? And so we oftentimes, and 99% of the times, we do not touch an image or video that's provided to us. Now, if it is normally someone who has died and, you know, there's a body there and we know the implications of that in terms of someone seeing that, we will cover as much as we can the person's face and much of the body if possible, right? So I want to apologize to the young lady, because the intent was never to make this about her specifically. And I understand that she's very upset, and obviously her parents upset because she was upset. So I want to make it very, very clear that this wasn't about the young lady. And I feel like this is one of those teachable moments. PrEP actually issued a statement on, I think it was Saturday sometime, about the situation. And I do want to address their statement. And I also do want to talk a little bit about what is happening at Cayman PrEP, where I think now for them, they need to be paying attention to why someone would even have made a comment about this, and why one of their own children would have been offended by this and decided to send this around. And the larger question then becomes, why was the community also offended by what they perceive to be happening at PrEP? So PrEP sent out a statement to parents and guardians of high school students and said that, you know, whilst they would favor never making any reference to it, that they must comment to quell the absolutely flawed perception arising from heinous social media posts and circulation this afternoon. So I think this must have been sent out late on Friday. It goes on to say that in a theater studies class, period 6, children use face paint and costumes for a mini class production. And at the end of the class, having removed the rest of her costume, a child inadvertently left school with dark face paint on, and this has been totally misconstrued. I can state categorically and with 100% certainty that this has absolutely nothing to do with racial connotations or undertone, and we're appalled by inaccurate comments and erroneous jumping to conclusions. Another PrEP student, without permission, has taken the video and shared a video photograph of a year 7 child, which we will investigate ASAP. I would appreciate whoever took and shared this to immediately get in contact with me. It is very distressing for the photographed child and totally wrong for this child to be distraught this evening. And it goes on to say, Cayman PrEP staunchly celebrates all aspects of diversity and does not tolerate any form of discrimination or racism ever. I would ask that all desist with adding to or further sharing this audience post, and kindly note that today also celebrated international languages as a culmination of Languages Week. Many came in traditional costumes to celebrate languages and diversity, and there's no correlation or relation to the aforementioned theater studies class whatsoever. So they didn't call it Cultural Day. They said it was International Language Day. I don't know what day it was supposed to be. Everybody else called it Cultural Day, and they said it was to celebrate languages, which isn't necessarily all of the culture. So one of the things I wanted to say about this is I think Cayman PrEP needs to maybe do have a look in the mirror, right? So let's remove the situation from this young lady for a minute. Why did this elicit such a response when it comes to Cayman Prep in particular? And if I were the administrators at Cayman Prep, I mean, obviously, accepting that this particular situation was misconstrued, I think the wider teachable moment is that there's something going on at Cayman Prep that they're not even aware of, that they have no sensitivity to, that, as someone said, they are tone deaf about, and they just don't get. I have heard for many, many years, I mean, when I say many, many years, I'm talking about 20 years back, the way that Cayman Prep treats their local students differently. And someone just again commenting saying they are very tone deaf. And I remember one of my good friends, her daughter's now, how old would she be? In her 30s, and she has children at Cayman Prep. And, you know, she had a situation where a male teacher said to her in class that basically, you know, all Caymanians are lazy. And that was the exact comment. And of course, this parent was very upset, took it to the principal and asked for the teacher to be spoken to. There is an undercurrent. And I want to say this, and I want to be very, very clear. I'm a parent who I'm actually on the waiting list at Cayman Prep for my daughter. So this concerns me in more ways than one, not that she'll ever get in, because that whole waiting list situation is another bit of a farce, right? Let me talk about that in a second. But I do think that there are things that are happening at Cayman Prep that the school administration is not aware of. They talk about they're culturally diverse. I've spoken to so many parents, Caymanian parents, who sent their children there. And when I say Caymanian parents, I'm not talking about a racial divide here, because Caymanians run the gamut of being fair skin, medium, darker skin, whatever, right? But the Caymanian parents oftentimes, especially if you're of a certain socioeconomic group and skin color, have a very different experience than people who come from abroad. And I really hope that Cayman Prep can take away from this something a little bit more. You need to engage with your student body and really try to listen to what your students and their parents are saying about what is happening at your school. There was a reason why this elicited such a response in relation to Cayman Prep, right? So outside of the general response, there is something very specific happening at Cayman Prep. Let's talk about this waiting list concept. There have been Caymanian families who've been on that waiting list for years, and the waiting list never moves for them. Then you'll have someone come in working for these law firms, whether it's a Maples or Walkers or wherever. Normally those are the top two. And all of a sudden their kids can get in with a snap of a finger. And I've always had people ask me, how is that possible? And I don't know the answer. I understand the school has told them, well, oh, Maples and Walkers, they have a separate waiting list, or they've reserved seats or something. And I'm like, wait a minute. When you say that they've reserved seats, you mean that they're paying every single month for students that don't actually exist yet, in anticipation of parents coming to the jurisdiction who will be bringing children with them? Is that what you're saying to me? Like, does Walkers and Maples pay for 10 spots at prep school that aren't, like, they're virtual spots, in other words, right? That there's actually no students there? Like, I'm a little bit confused about that, because time and time again, I'm hearing, oh, wow, this person just came on island and all of a sudden they are into the school, they're into the institution, and other people have been waiting 3, 4, 5 years on this waiting list. Some months back, there was a discussion in social media. I can't remember exactly what it was. It might have been late last year, but again, it was talking about how, you know, a lot of these schools just don't get it. And someone specifically mentioned Cayman Prep and how they had been waiting on the waiting list for so long. Ironically, after they posted this post that got a lot of traction, within the matter of a couple of days, they got a phone call. Oh, yes, your child has been accepted into Cayman Prep. You know, I don't even want to discuss it because, like I said, my child is on the waiting list, but I have to discuss it because that's my job, keeping a pulse on what is actually happening in this community. And sometimes I discuss these things even to my own detriment, because now, you know, my child will never get into Cayman Prep. And maybe that's a good thing. I don't really know. But, you know, in terms of their academic program, I think a lot of us accept that they actually, you know, receive very good remarks when it comes to their academic program. But someone needs to look beyond the academic program and really start to ask some questions. For example, here's another parent says, no, they don't. All 3 of my kids attend Cayman Prep, and I can tell you some horror stories regarding racism. They are very tone deaf. Another parent sent this. Her children are no longer there. They've since left. But this was her comment on Friday. She says, but the thing is, if it was done for any reason, what needs to happen is an apology and a vow to educate faculty and students why blackface is inappropriate and hurtful to many people. Instead, only defending the white people. This is a teachable moment. So let's assume that this isn't blackface, because again, I'm satisfied that the parents, have clarified exactly what happened in this situation. I still think there's a level of tone deafness that is occurring at this institution. Someone else said, I heard a teacher put that on her, but why was she allowed to keep it on? Again, it was part of a costume, had nothing to do with that, but their perception. And again, the terminology used here is that the kids will see that and feel intimidated. I don't know, my friends of color were disgusted. The white privilege is really shown, absolutely tone deaf. Now, as a person who has lived in a very multicultural environment, and I say this as much as I can possibly say this, I was married to a Caucasian person with blue eyes. I mean, you can't, of German descent, right? I have dated Indian people. I have dated, people, Black Caribbean people. I really do my best. I mean, I try to live a life where I personally do not see color. But that's hard when I live in a world that judges you by how you look. And part of how you look, unfortunately, is the skin tone that you have to walk around with that you have no choice about, your pigmentation, your color. When I hear 3 and 4-year-old children already at that age in this community having a conversation about, I'm brown skin, so my fairer friends are prettier just because they're lighter skin. I think, how does a 4-year-old have that conversation? What is happening in our homes and our school environments that would ever make children think that they are any less than because of the color of their skin? And these are conversations that somebody must be having with a 3 and 4-year-old for them to come back to their parents and have that discourse. And that for me is what's troubling, because we always have on blindfolds in this community and we stick our heads in the proverbial sand, pretending like none of this does not exist. And pretending that it doesn't exist does more harm in my mind than actually addressing it and saying that, we do have some issues in this community as it relates to discrimination based on color, which is called racism, based on class, which is called classism, and maybe some other things, right? And so in my mind, those conversations need to be had. And I think what ends up happening is everybody wants to shut it down. So moving away from the situation Friday, because again, the young lady wasn't trying to portray that. If she wasn't trying to portray that, then that's the fact. That's what it is. And again, our apologies for seeing the photo, the video, actually, it was a video, it wasn't even a photo, and assuming that that's what it was. Because now that we have a little bit more context, we understand fully what transpired there. But the response that it elicited, I don't think is a response that we should ignore, especially in the context of Cayman Prep. And I really hope that the administrators at Cayman Prep are actually paying attention to the situation. So Lori says, as a mother, I can't wrap my head around why another mother would have posted this to site that reaches a lot of people without investigating the facts. Very sad. Lori, thank you for your comment. Deep Blue Sea says prep school didn't handle the situation. Instead of vilifying the student who took the photo, prep should have admitted that they messed up by allowing the child to walk around with it on. Good morning to Dawn. And again, prep school obviously doesn't see anything, wrong with that. And I kind of feel like it was probably a situation where even if it was blackface, I don't think that prep school would have had very much of a different response than what was sent out. This is just my honest feeling about them based on the feedback that I've gotten from a lot of people. So Anthony says the context is interesting. On the other hand, the uproar about cultural insensitivity completely drowns out the context. The school should be a safe place in that you shouldn't have to worry about getting outed as something you aren't for simply dressing up for a play. Absolutely, Anthony. And that is where the apology is 100% due in terms of the young lady and her family. Magdalene says, obviously, the stigma of racism exists at Cayman Prep. I'm actually went there in the 70s, and I won't comment. I choose St. Ignatius for my son's sixth form of if that says anything. Well, you see, this is where I think people need to comment. Maybe prep school really has no clue. Is it possible that they do not know whatsoever what the perception of them is in the community? And maybe there are parents such as yourselves, even dating back to the 1970s, that needs to have a conversation in this community about a school like prep school. I mean, it's really, really unfortunate. Deep Blue Sea says the school should be upset with prep. They failed in their responsibility. Reading the scathing remarks on IG about prep by their own students speaks volumes. And that's the point that that's sort of the bigger teachable moment that I want to address. Again, separating it from what happened from the young lady, because she's owed an apology 1,000%, and so is her family. But the bigger conversation is people definitely had some very, very interesting comments to make about prep. And I feel like those comments have by far fallen on deaf ears as it relates to the institution itself. So Emma, good morning to you. This is a new week, a new month. Cece says, good morning. No lies are told. Steve says, get over it. You messed up. It was Languages Day. My girlfriend teaches there and spoke about that day all week. Yes, Steve. And the point is, you still miss it. We don't have an issue saying that we messed up in relation to the young lady, but obviously when people refuse to actually talk about why even a student decided that maybe this was offensive, clearly they were not looking at the details and considering, everybody was saying it was Cultural Day. It's only when the school sent out this email that they have clarified that it was actually Languages Week, and that this theater day or theater part of the day had nothing to do with that, and that she was not dressing at all. And, but I don't expect people who've come in, and clearly Steve is one of those individuals. I don't expect people who've come into this environment to truly understand how Caymanians feel or how Caymanians are being discriminated against. And that is part of the problem, Steve. Your girlfriend teaches there. Where's your girlfriend from? I'm just curious. She's Caymanian? Because if she was, you would not have those types of comments to be making, I can assure you, because you'd probably know some of the realities, even from the perspective of the teachers, what is happening there. So this other parent says, my oldest son was referred to as an orange-head Negro, and the boys were just ordered to do a lunchtime detention. Students, not students. A lot of kids got very upset. We have someone else who says maybe we're making more of this than is necessary. This is Sandra, but I'm white, and I would absolutely have no objection to a dark-skinned person painting their face white to impersonate a white person, which, by the way, I've hardly ever seen happen, and I don't see what offense would to be taken the other way. Well, again, this is probably a matter of culture, because if you don't see, and this isn't what the young lady was doing, but if you don't see how someone painting their face dark to impersonate a dark person has a culture, a historical culture of being offensive, then you just don't know the story of blackface. And that's why you wouldn't be offended by it. Because if you understood the story of blackface and why that is extremely offensive, you would not say that you don't see an issue with the other way around, and so therefore there's no issue with blackface. I mean, I don't even know how to explain this, but it is considered extremely. All right, let me explain it then, right? Let's go to the historychannel.com, because clearly if people don't even understand why it's offensive, then we need to have a much broader conversation than what is happening at Cayman Prep. Just give me 1 second here, folks. I just need to grab something real quick. Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to share this link because I think that, again, for someone to say that even if it was blackface, they don't really see anything wrong with it. Let us go back to why it is offensive. Because, you know, at the end of the day, people don't know, then people just don't know. And I would say that, you know, as someone who tries to be tolerant of a lot of different things, that it is entirely possible that people just don't even know the historical context of blackface and why, as this history.com article says, how the history of blackface is rooted in racism and why it is still offensive to this day. And no one should ever think that putting on a blackface is something that would be okay, you know, because putting on a white face, which, by the way, people of color don't normally do. Like, I can't even think of an instance where that has been done. That does not have the same historical context as someone putting on blackface. So blackface became popular in the US after the Civil War as white performers played characters that demeaned and dehumanized African Americans. And, you know, as a Caribbean person, I want to say this because I think a lot of people live in a very comfortable bubble, even in the Caribbean, about the racial divide that it exists in our region without a doubt. But we're happy to ignore it. We're happy to talk about the fact that a lot of us are, we have 1% non-Negro blood. And somehow we think because we come out a little bit clearer complexion, that means that we don't have racism in the Caribbean and even in the Cayman Islands. And we're happy to ignore these conversations. We're happy to make this all about, America was the one with slavery. Well, every single country in the world, and especially this part of the world, had people being shipped from Africa and had to deal with slavery. And it still permeates our community and our society to this day. So the portrayal of blackface when people darken their skin with shoe polish, grease paint, or burnt cork, and paint on enlarged lips and often exaggerated features is steeped in centuries of racism. It peaked in popularity during an era in the United States when demands for civil rights by recently emancipated slaves triggered racial hostility. And today, because of blackface historic use to denigrate people of African descent, its continued use is still considered racist. I'm going to share this link with you all because I hope that if you are an individual who say that you wouldn't see anything wrong with this, that perhaps you would take a moment to have a conversation about why you don't know about blackface and what its true historical implications are. Now, let me tell you how I was educated. We all have the opportunity to sit back and experience different things in life. And sometimes we can go out and have those experiences in order to broaden our horizon and broaden our perspectives about things. When I was in university at USF, this is my undergrad, I had 1 or 2 credits left that I kind of had to finish up. So it wasn't anything specific to my major. It was like you're this credit, 10 credits, whatever, short of what's required for your degree program. So just take whatever you want, like literally basket weaving, if that was available, could have been taken. So I decided my very last semester to take this course in, I forget what the exact term of it was, but it was based on racial, I don't even know what the course was. It might have been like a Black history course, but it was like, it covered the periods from like the 1940s into the 1960s in America. And it was one of the most eye-opening courses that I took, culturally eye-opening, historically eye-opening in my entire university career. It wasn't just about, you do English literature, you do British literature, you do, whatever. Those things are very specific about teaching you literature and composition and all this sort of stuff. This course made me a better human being because I was able to understand what really transpired in the world of, especially in the American context, but generally in the world of slavery and racism around the world. And it was such an eye-opener for me because honestly, I didn't know, because so much of that still is not taught in schools. You get a very whitewashed, total pun intended, description of what happened with slavery. And you have textbooks that are written by non-people of color. And, the conversation and the message is entirely skewed. And so we grow up with a certain perspective of what happened to our forefathers that is not accurate at all. This particular course that I took, not only was it a course in Black history that delved into those things, but it was a visual course. Like, it wasn't an in-class course. It was probably one of the early days of doing like an online course. And a lot of it was like video-based. And I was so disturbed psychologically and really brought to my knees when I would see images and photos and videos of not that long ago when our ancestors, people of color, were subjected to some of the most horrific things in the world, including lynching. Because they couldn't drink from the same water fountain. They couldn't sit in the same portion of the bus. They couldn't walk on the same side of the street as white people, all in the name oftentimes of religion and God, and, perpetrating this falsehood that because you have a lighter complexion or because you are quote unquote white, that somehow that placed you to be in a better position than other people. And I remember at times watching the videos and getting angry. There were times that I was in tears and I was upset, trying to understand the history of a people that I am a part of. And that has changed the trajectory of how I perceive a lot of things in my life. And I think if you've never had that experience, because for me it was a real eye-opener, then you can comfortably sit back and say things like racism doesn't exist in the Cayman Islands because you wouldn't see it if it slapped you in the face. And I do think that there are a lot of institutions in this island, including schools, that really do not see it. And you see it as someone who is a little bit more tuned in, and I don't want to, this isn't about overplaying the race card, because Caymanians grew up believing that there was no racial divide a lot of times. And I'm talking about like our forefathers and stuff like that. Like, they had friends, they'll tell you, oh no, I grew up with this family, they were considered Cayman white. And, we all like ate from the same pot. We all did whatever. And I said, yeah, then, you need to explain to me, how is it that in this day and age, we have, and I'm not going to name any names, but they're Caymanians. And as far as I'm concerned, they're people of color, but because they're a little bit fairer complexion, we have people who got upset when their daughter got pregnant for a Black man and literally like kicked the daughter out. Some of them physically have abused their children because, oh, how dare you have a child for a person of color? and that person was not accepted, it's not going to be acceptable for you to marry that person. So, when you sit down and you think, oh, well, my dad grew up with him. Yeah, but when it comes to actually, oh, am I allowed to sit at your dining room table and break bread with you in the same way that your own children are? Or do you have an issue with, a Black person marrying into your family? Those are the real conversations that Caymanians are incredibly not comfortable with. So Britta says maybe expats pay more. Things sure have changed. I'm not aware of any fee structure based on if you're an expat or not. And Jonathan, we could certainly look at their list, but Don says that says that I've been saying this for years, that private schools grant promotions and the biggest form of segregation in our country. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. What I do know is that this is real and it does exist. And it's something that no one really ever wants to talk about. And it is happening. I have seen, I have seen it in so many instances. And again, Anthony says, you see color, Sandy, you just don't let it paint the way you treat others. That's the difference between you and many other authority figures, is that they don't see color because they don't understand the experiences others have based on their race. And that's the type of knowledge the Cayman Prep admin needs, it sounds like. And this is the thing. I am not, I think probably Anthony has explained it the best way that I probably couldn't explain it any differently, right? Because I want, even as a mother of a young child, I want her to have friends of all cultures and of all races, because I might have shared this with you guys before. One of the biggest opportunities for me growing up in the US was when I went to university, having been in a very culturally diverse environment. I mean, I learned so much about my Asian friends. Even within the Asian culture, there's different types of subcultures and different types of things. I mean, it was an amazing and eye-opening experience. And experience is important. And I think that diversity, which adds to the experience that we can all have in life, is really, really important. And that's why I go out of my way. My daughter's friends, she goes to a private school. There's not a whole lot of children of color necessarily in that environment. But I go out of my way to make sure that she spends time with all of her friends, regardless of where they're from, because I feel like there is always something that can be learned from that experience. So whether they're from the UK, whether they're Caribbean people, whether they're American people, whether they're from Spain or somewhere else in Europe, there's a lot for her to learn in terms of cultural diversity. And I think that it's important for people who come into this country to also accept that this is a Caribbean country, which means that, the people here are of a slave descent. We had a 50-50 population, 50% slave, 50% white, non-slave. And that has mixed up our community and our culture in a way that has some very, very interesting implications. So much so that most Caymanians are probably a little bit confused about, what they are even. I have always found it interesting when I came back to Cayman, where I would hear Caymanians, and I think the Caymanians are also part of the problem, talk about shades of color. And it was so weird when I first came back, because I'm like, what do you mean a lighter skin? What's lighter skin to you? Like, I couldn't even see it. To me, you're black or white, right? There was no, well, this person's light skin, this person's medium brown. I'm like, huh? Like, I found that confusing. And that was something that I had to get used to when I returned to Cayman, because I'm like, what does that even mean? Why do we have to define people based on shades of color? Because your non-white counterparts understand and define you very, very precisely. If you have 1 ounce of Negro blood, you are considered a black person. And it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter how much you cream your hair. It doesn't matter how much you put in the Japanese treatment and straighten it. You are still considered a person of color. And I know Caymanians who go out of their way to ensure that they try to whitewash their features, for lack of a better word. And the hair is always one of the big things that we feel it necessary to do. TB Parkinson said, Miss Sandy, it's really sad, but I've been hearing this about Caymanians being lazy by non-Caymanians all the time. It's really sad because lazy people exist in all nationalities. It's really sad that when Caymanians go to another man's country, we humble ourselves and respect the fact that we are in another man's country, and Caymanians have into the world to come, say and do whatever they want, and we accept that. And over time, we accept all the changes that come with it. People, there's lazy everywhere, not only Cayman. So Ms. Sue says it didn't look good and they messed up letting the girl leave it on. And, I thought about it more and more over the weekend. And the perception is that the teachers saw nothing wrong with it because there's more to the costume than that. And I thought that would be very, very interesting, that teachers could not see how that could have, even from a distance, been misconstrued by others, but yet other students saw something else. Just an observation. Like it was to me very, very bizarre at the end of the day. Anthony says, I think government schools in the Cayman Islands in general is incredibly culturally ignorant. Dean says, growing up, Cayman prep kids were always prejudiced. And I don't want to pigeonhole Cayman prep kids, but of all of the schools out there, I have heard more stories about prep being completely oblivious to how children are treated, completely oblivious to how children and parents are being treated or how they feel going to that school. And I think a lot of parents just suck it up in the name of trying to get their kids the best possible education and teach their children, okay, this is what you're going to have to deal with in life, because we live in a world that will judge you based on ridiculousness, including the color of your skin. So Johan says, shouldn't there be a general rule in the media or social media that no child should be videoed or photographed? Doesn't matter if you go to John Gray or prep or any other private school or educational institution, etc. You know what, Johan? That is a very, very interesting point. And I say that normally we don't put kids up, but I also remember when the John Gray kids, I think it was John Gray, boys and girls had put out a video, and we put it up on our platform, of them talking about sex. Not a single person, because they were all Black kids from Georgetown, not a single person said, what's the problem with this? These are kids. Maybe you shouldn't be sharing this. Instead, everybody's like, yes, let's talk about why these young boys and girls are having sexually inappropriate conversations. And do parents see what their children are doing? So I think it's interesting that you make that comment now, but I would make the observation that when there have been other times when we have posted children, Caribbean children, Caymanian children, Black children, even on this platform, and no one ever made a comment about the fact that they were children, because they were children of color. And I say that because if you know anything about racism, you will also know that we tend to judge Black children, Caribbean children, which are Black children, at a very different standard. You know what the general standard is? Oh, they're over-sexualized. They are criminals, even as children, right? Look at all the research that's out there of how we judge Black kids. We have a very different standard. And so we're happy to expose them. We're happy to put them in the media. And normally when it does happen in real time, there's no conversation about, oh, wait a minute, they're still kids. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, when they're white kids, they get a very different standard. They're still considered pure, even if they haven't sex at 12. So this is, we're part of the situation. And I recognize that we try to, as much as possible, cover people of all nationalities and of all, whenever we report something, I don't try to look at where the person's from, because to me, that doesn't matter. And I know early on, there were people like, oh my God, she's just reporting on Jamaicans. I'm like, no, actually, we report on Caymanians, Hondurans. Like, to me, it doesn't matter where you're from. It's the story that's important. What's going on? Why are you even in the news, sort of thing. But people always want to look for the divide. And maybe that also is part of the conversation that we need to be having. So this Moya says they only want to address the student that felt offended and set up the video. They don't seem to want to address and reassure the community that racism isn't the undertone. That right there speaks volumes. And I think to try to be fair to them, you know, let's look at it this way. They're not feeling that they have to address it because they're saying that's not what it was. But I think they missed the bigger point of the fact that the community, your internal community, your internal students, obviously had a certain perception. And they, you know, that comment that was in the video said just another effing day at K-Man Prep. If I were an administrator or principal and I saw students saying that, I'm like, why would students say that? If they're perceiving this to be something which it wasn't, but why would students, be like, wow, just another day at K-Man Prep? Because if this was blackface, that's what we would expect at K-Man Prep. Like, that alone speaks volumes to what is happening, I think, in that environment, and nobody seems to want to talk about it. You know, I see some WhatsApp messages coming in. This person says, everyday racism. Here's it looks like a song that says nigger loves a watermelon, ha ha ha. Wow. And of course, again, people who make watermelon jokes and stuff and don't even know or don't care that there is a historical link to racism and these types of comments about watermelon, fried chicken, and this sort of thing. This person says, morning, thanks for tackling this issue for the good information. Thanks for tackling this topic for the good information. Good time to talk about the racist ice cream truck songs too. Oh. And then they talk about, they've sent a couple links here. And an ice cream truck jingles, racist history has caught up to it. You know, last year we did, during the whole COVID pandemic, there was a lot happening in the US. And we did quite a few shows on racism. And I know y'all were made very uncomfortable by the shows. I know it without a doubt. And we had people on here who were protesting in the US. This was after the murder of George Floyd, was his name, I think. And we had people in California, in New York, and elsewhere who were involved in those protests on the American side, coming on this show and talking about their experiences. I would invite some of you to go back and have a listen to those shows. My cousin, which technically is my husband's cousin, and obviously they're of Indian descent, but they consider themselves Jamaicans. They're like, we're just Black Jamaicans. We happen to be of Indian descent. So they still look very much Indian, but they don't necessarily, you know, celebrate that culture. They consider themselves, they're like, you know, second, third generation Jamaicans now, right? Yes, at some point their folks came from India. But she was talking about, it was so interesting to hear Indira speak on this. She was saying that her and her brother look a little bit different. So she's a little bit lighter skinned, even as a, you know, Indian Black person. She's a little bit lighter skinned than him. He came out a little bit darker, full siblings, but this happens when you're mixed. And his experience was oftentimes very different than her experience, having grown up in the States. She was more accepted. And no doubt she was more accepted because she's also a woman. And women tend to be seen as very non-confrontational and easier to handle and take advantage of. And so even the African American or the Black woman is seen very different to the Black male. And I'm just telling y'all facts here. The Black male is seen as threatening and too overly aggressive. And we use all these terms to describe Black men, generally speaking, that, you know, white women are also aggressive, but they're less threatening. And so she was speaking about how, having grown up, she saw a difference because she was a little bit lighter. You know, they both have beautiful Black hair. Her hair is nice and beautiful and long and whatever. And so maybe at some level, people saw her as being a little bit more exotic, you know, and the brother was like, oh, he's still a threat because he's a little bit too dark. Good morning to Miss Darlene. Nothing that we know about since we updated it last time. So we gave an update some weeks ago, and nothing else that we're aware of has transpired. So Johan says that too many people live in a bubble and cannot or choose not to understand what can be considered offensive, racist, or distasteful to others because there's a general lack of mutual respect that is overt in the Cayman Islands. And I agree with that 100%. And I think what has also happened in the context of the Cayman experience is that for a lot of us, we think that the financial divide can save us from racism. So if you have enough money, you're allowed in. So you're invited to certain events, you're invited to certain parties. But little do you know that that doesn't mean that people are still not seeing your color, because it becomes evident when you have fallen from grace. And I can think of some, very big examples of that. So people like the Jeff Webbs of the world, he was allowed in. He was allowed to play on that board. Yes, your kids can go to a certain school, Canova Watson, because you are, a multimillionaire, you're good. We're going to ignore your blackness for the moment. But when the ish starts to hit the fan, you are still a Black man that has now fallen from grace. And, it's a very, very different story. I think it's just conversation that we need to have. Why are we so uncomfortable even admitting our history and talking about it, embracing it? It's not something that you have to hyper focus on. So I don't walk around every single day like, oh, I'm a Black woman in this community, and so, I'm different. And I'm like, no, my goal is never to be treated differently because of the color of my skin or how I choose to wear my hair. I mean, I've heard other people in this community who are absolutely beautiful say that when they decide to wear curls or they decide to go natural, whatever, how they are perceived is like, well, why are you wearing your hair like that? And they're like, because this is actually the natural tendency of my hair and this is how I want to wear it. And then the conversation shifts. You're not as beautiful anymore because you got kinks in your hair and because your edges are not straight. I'm just telling y'all the truth. Deep Blue Sea says there's no history behind whiteface, so that's a stupid comment by whoever said that. And I think that's why I wanted to, because when someone says that, and I don't think that they're purposely trying to be offensive, but I suppose if people don't know, they don't know. And a lot of people have not gone out of their way to learn anything about history, anything about the Black experience. And even as Caymanians, I'll say it again, because we grew up in an environment where we had 50-50, which is one of the highest ratios, I think, in the entire Caribbean of slave to non-slave ratio, right? We grew up with a slightly different situation that has allowed us to pretend that there are no elements of racism in our community. And yet here we are in 2021, and I can tell you, just a couple years ago, a high-ranking government official, was upset, former politician, former government minister, was upset when his daughter, and when I look at this person, I'm like, to me, you're a Black man, son. Like, I don't know what you're talking about, but whatever. He was upset when his daughter got pregnant by a Black Caymanian. And I was like, are we still doing this? That was my initial response. I'm like, are you people kidding? Like, this can't be for real. And they were like, yeah, oh yeah. He was really upset. So upset, like, oh, I'll kick you in the stomach and make you lose this baby kind of upset. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. But this is what we're still dealing with. So we're dealing with people who have an identity crisis themselves. People who can't be proud of their own culture. Who can't say that, people who genuinely cannot say, I am Black and beautiful. Right? And to me, that just blows my mind. We have people in this community, just because they came out a little bit fairer skin and can blow dry the hair straight, would argue into the ground that they're not Black. And I look at them and I just shake my head. I'm like, are you kidding me? When I pick friends, I don't pick friends based on race. Like, I don't care about any of that. I pick my friends based on what's on the inside, the character, who they are, the type of people that they are. And I've known horrible people who are Black, and I've known horrible people who are white, and I've known horrible people who are Asian. And to me, none of that matters. But I know that that's not the real world, right? I know that there are Caymanian men who even today will get married to an Asian girl, Filipino girl, because they want their children to come out with straight hair. And that's important to them. They don't really care about sometimes even any of the other features. And so when you pick people based on those characteristics, you yourself, even as a person of color, is being racist. But I think they're feeling the necessity to do it because they know the reality of living in Cayman, and that you get a little edge up when you are a little bit fairer skin, straighter hair. Look at our pageants, right? Anytime we had a darker skinned Caymanian walk away with the crown, there was always this big discourse and big discussion. Only in more recent times on the international level, Miss Universe pageant, have we seen countries like Jamaica start to place in the top 5, in the top 3, and not just place like women of color, but women of natural beauty, like women with an afro who were not processing their hair. They had their natural curls. And, I think it was about maybe 3-4 years ago, we saw Miss Jamaica, I can't remember, she came first runner up, and everybody was like blown away by that. Why is that such an unusual occurrence? Even in the 2000s, to me, is just absolutely crazy. So Olivia says this is why there's widespread racism in Cayman, especially from expatriates. Well, I agree with you. And I also think within our own Caymanian society, there are levels of discrimination and racism as well. I see it all the time. Scholarship recipients, people who get jobs, people who are given the benefit of the doubt. A white person can steal you blind of millions of dollars, and they will get an excuse that, oh, well, they don't know how to manage their money in a construction business. And I'm looking at you like, really? If that was a person of color, they're a thief. Call the RCIPS financial unit, lock them up. So even the response is so incredibly different. Moya says that person's comment about blackface and whiteface, like, wow, it's like making the comment slavery happened a long time ago. Get over it. It would be one thing to get over it if there were not existing remnants of it in our community and people are still being judged by the same standards, right? It's even interesting sometimes when people try to get cute about me when they're upset because I'm in support of vaccines or I'm saying things that they just don't like. One of the conversations we had the other day in that private anti-vaxxer group, one of the things that they said about me, which is really, really interesting, is they tried to make comments about my looks. But the comments that they make are the same traditional comments that they've always made about Black people, right? So they're going to call you certain names based on your Black features, predominantly the big and full lips. And I don't know if you guys ever pick up on this. You might, kind of skirt over it and not pay attention to it. But this is precisely what is happening. So they're going to try to make a derogatory comment about me and my looks. And what do they go after? The one thing that African Americans have always been made fun of, which is their big lips. Never mind that the Kylie Jenners of the world trying to plump up their lips and spending thousands of dollars to do that. Because on her, big lips are attractive. On people of color and Black people, it's like, oh, yeah, that's a problem. That makes you look like a grouper or whatever the term was that they used, something ridiculous. And again, we just kind of skirt over it and don't see anything wrong with it. Anthony says we were settled and colonized by the most racist imperial power in the world. Of course we were racist. Doss says facts. Flashpoint, good morning. When a school bus has a large percentage of people with a similar cultural background, those other students in the minority will typically, unfortunately, be subjected to some form of discrimination. Is discrimination happening in government schools? Like I said, it is happening in our overall community at different levels. That's what I want people to get. There is discrimination because sometimes somebody is a Jamaican. And, you know, I had a conversation. Let me tell you how crazy the situation is in Cayman and how people see color and stuff, right? So a lady called me maybe about a month or so ago. And she was telling me about a situation with her soon-to-be, I guess, ex-husband. And they have 2 kids, 2 boys, and they were fighting over, you know, whatever. And she's like, he's Cayman and she's Jamaican. He's not paying custody. He's not paying child support for these boys, all these issues. So I listened to what she had to say. And then she said to me something that I thought was very, very interesting towards the end of the conversation. She says, oh, and he is a white Caymanian. I don't know what this had to do with conversation. Like, this is how it came out. I never asked, whatever. She told me who he was. She gave me a name, and I'm like, I don't know him. She's like, oh yeah, he's from Savannah. And I said, okay, I still don't know him. She's like, well, he's a white Caymanian. So my boys came out with really nice brown skin. And I like literally went, huh? Like my brain paused and stopped. And I thought to myself, why did she say that? How is that relevant at all to the conversation? And I didn't respond to her in terms of that, but it did get me to thinking, and I actually mentioned it when I was speaking to someone else. I'm like, it was so weird that for whatever reason, even in just a moment in time, she decided to focus on, yeah, oh, they're so pretty because of their skin color. And I'm just like, what? She's like, oh, he's a white Caymanian, so my boys came out looking really pretty with nice brown skin. Okay. I'm sure maybe that mother knows in this society that's going to make a difference to some people, that they didn't take her complexion, and so they have a fighting chance in Cayman. I don't know. This is why people are bleaching their skins, folks. This is why they're ingesting all this stuff to make themselves browner, because somehow they think that that's going to make them look better. Natasha says, need to check where the individuals are from. Racism to persons from the US, the UK, and South Africa is not exactly something many of them see as being wrong. Let's not leave Canada out of the mix, because I've had some very interesting experience with some Canadian people as well. And I think, again, it comes down to, if you've never been exposed to, you know, people of different cultures and you haven't grown up, and this goes for Black people as well, you've not been exposed to white people and you've never grown up in that environment, maybe by default, you automatically have these discriminations that you're exposed to, this discriminatory way of thinking and being. And I really want people to think about this. You know, your friend list, what does your friend circle look like? How diverse is it? And this is for everyone, regardless of whether you're white, Black, whatever. How diverse is your friendship circle? Are you limiting yourself to just Caribbean people, just people in West Bay, just Georgetowners? Like, how broad are you willing to be in terms of your exposure? Especially if you have children, I think the more people that you can expose your children to, the better. TB says, I don't know we are racist. I think we know it exists from some and have to learn to live with it around us. But why? I mean, you know, I think we need to question it and have the conversations. So good morning, Daisy. I'm even perplexed at, you know, this is why I think discrimination, even based on, and I know now I'm about to make a lot of y'all very uncomfortable, you know, discrimination even based on sexual orientation. Why should I discriminate against people in the LGBTQ community if I'm saying that discrimination based on color, religion, all these other things are wrong? Is it also not wrong for me to discriminate against someone because they're gay, bisexual, or lesbian, or whatever? Steven says, wait until you read about sundown towns. I don't even know what that is. Send us some information. Chantel says, here I am lying around trying to get Black all winter. Or trying to get back. Did you meant to say back or Black? And I mean, this is the irony of it. is people who aren't Black who want to pump up their lips, because that's a big thing now, which has traditionally been a very Black feature. They are tanning. Like, I'll never forget when, again, I was at USF. There were people coming from like New York, New Jersey, and they would lay out in the sun all day long to get this crisp look that I was naturally born with. I mean, it's not quite, didn't quite acquire it in the same way, but they're trying to be as dark as possible because they think that getting a tan makes them look healthier and they look better. And a lot of times they're the same people who are discriminated against you because you're like that complexion that they're aiming. It's just the most bizarre thing in the world. But because you have the option, you go into this inside, that's not your natural complexion, that's going to go away. So Vanessa goes on about the video. Says more than 95% of the comments were condemning how you're emotionally harming that child, yet you kept the video and your offensive editorial up for hours. Vanessa, thank you for your comment. And obviously Vanessa doesn't want to participate in this conversation. That's okay. People still won't see it. And people won't see that 95% of the comments actually weren't condemning it. They were talking about what was happening at that school. And 99.9% of the comments that were indeed, condemning it were from a particular group. And that's all I'm going to say. Again, the point is completely missed by a lot of people. I see that we're behind in our comments. Al says, we really live in la la land. Every time Black people talk about racism, others say, shut up and move. Wearing white face is not an offense. When people says don't see color, they're ignoring people of color. When they say all lives matter, only when they hear Black lives matter. Some people don't want to hear about slavery, racism. Cayman always make excuses for these injustices for humanity. Your silence is their comfortable selective outrage is sickening. Who feels it knows it. Wake up. The hate is real. Steven says the us don't care if you mix, or the US, as long as you have 1%. Yep, exactly. Good morning, Miss Brenda. She says, unfortunately, racism is a part of many cultures. That's why they don't think they're doing anything wrong. Add to that, these people refuse to hear or learn our culture. Instead, they want to force theirs on us. It's imported, and they're being seated in these private schools. Miranda says, Cayman is becoming another South Africa. Well, I certainly hope not. All in the name of our tax-free dollars. Louis says, live in another place in the world, and as a Caymanian, you soon realize that you are Black regardless of what shade of color. Okay. I can see major fallouts coming your way. Okay, Vanessa. Damaris says, watching Good Morning from New York. Anthony says, ooh, the tea. Moya says, exactly. Truth speak it. Facts, says Anya. Magdalene says, thank you because they were Black in public schools. Tell them. And public school, tell them yes. Miranda, just a quick note. Someone sent me something that you posted. I thought you were commenting that same day. And maybe this is as good a time as any to address this now. So someone sent me a comment that you made on Mario's page. And I want to just understand this comment because it had me a little bit confused. So you made a comment. I'm trying to see if I can actually find it because the person sent me the screenshot where you said something to Mario that he looked like I can't remember exactly what you said. I think you were trying to be funny, but I wasn't sure. You were asking him something about how he looked, so something or another. Where is that comment now? And then you went on to say, oh, don't block me now. Okay, here it is. Miranda. You say, Mario, who is your barber? Laughing out loud. Is it your cat? And then you went on to say that apparently, let me just get the next comment. He said, Mario, you have a good work ethics. I make fun of your hair and you did not block me like Sandra did when I warned her about a court case. So Miranda, I'm curious, because if you were blocked, you wouldn't be here commenting this morning. And then when I read that comment again, the person sent it to me, I said, hold on a second. Miranda warned me about a court case. So that means that Miranda was actually using a fake account, because what was blocked that day was actually a fake account. I can't even remember the name of it. I'd have to go back and have a look. But it was obviously not this account. So Miranda, you got some explaining to do, because this comment is very, very weird. Obviously, you're not blocked if you're here commenting today. You're commenting through YouTube. Was it your Facebook that was blocked? But as far as I remember, and I can certainly try to go back and have a look, but another name was actually blocked from social media. So was it a fake account that was blocked that you had on Facebook? And the reason why you were blocked had nothing to do with you warning anybody about a court case. It was because you were doing the very same thing in relation to the court case. And I'm sure Irvlyn, will remember this. You were doing the exact same thing in relation to the court case that the court has actually said not to do. And so we could not allow you to continue making those comments, because the next thing you know, that same person would be able to run to court and said, look, this lady is making these comments. Now, it's interesting, Miranda, I don't recall the name you were using on that account as being Miranda Sylvester. Don't know how many accounts you got, but okay. Anthony says that's big facts. Anya says we're looking who they stand for. Baliki says in the African university I went to, regardless of the discipline you were in, you did not graduate until you passed a course called African Studies. The course taught us about slavery, colonialism, the American Civil Rights Movement, Caribbean history, and that Black people have a rich history as any other culture, and Cayman needs to do better in this area. Yes, and I think that my course I was referring to earlier was called something like that, like African American Studies, I think is what it was called. So it focused on the American experience, not necessarily colonialism outside of America, but it existed everywhere. And of course, one of the biggest colonialist countries in the world is our mother country, the UK. And we remain one of only, 6 overseas territories. Magdalene said some of her own Caymanians that are of lighter hue look down on John Gray High School. Now, Brenda talks about the financial assistance that government gives out to the private schools. I'm curious about this, because I have to admit that I don't know how much assistance we're talking about, but it is also one of the reasons why I have always wondered why the waiting list situation is what it is. If government, because I know that an unfortunate situation is created because of how government has decided that they cannot entertain, no, that's a lie. Now, Vanessa, you are a damn liar. Oh my God. Posted a comment. So, what? Okay, so there was their faces were more than obvious. I don't even know what the point is that you're trying to make. So how was they were Black children? Like, what's your point? So, okay, I use the same standard, but you weren't upset. You weren't upset then. I mean, I must say, this is the first time, Vanessa, I've seen any of your comments being upset about something being posted with kids. Yeah, they were posted in their full view. They made the video and they put it out there. And I make no apologies for that. Let me be very, very clear here. The apology here is in relation to the fact that the backstory, which was presented by the students and whoever made and sent out the video, of what this is about was completely false. Had this been a situation where that child was in blackface, we'd be having a very, very different conversation. Understand where I'm coming from, Vanessa. And that was not the case. Okay. In relation to the school, I need to look into this because I'm very, very curious about how much government is providing private institutions by way of subsidies, because government has closed off the school system from expat children. That's something I actually think should change. I think this government is well placed to do away with that policy. If there is, and I think the policy is, if there is room, then expat children can be considered. But normally there isn't room. I think we need to start purposely mixing children. Now, whether or not their parents will want them to go to our Caymanian government schools will be a very different matter. But I think that there should be a commingling of all, or stop the subsidies completely, right? Because what's the point of government giving a subsidy? And again, I don't know the details of how much money they're giving, but what's the point of government giving a subsidy when Caymanian children have such a difficult time even getting into these schools? If you don't have a connection and you don't get on that priority list, your chances are slim to none. You know, people tell you, oh, from the second you're pregnant, you better start putting your children on these waiting lists. But yet people who come here months before can get into the school institutions without a problem. And I think that that's an issue. Alice says some people should really read their history in Black history books. The greatness of Black was washed over and rewritten by people. And you know what is so funny? I'm going back to last year when we were having this discussion over a number of different cases. You know, it's just so incredibly funny how even when we started to talk about things that have been invented and created by people of color, all of a sudden it was like, nobody even knew that a Black person created this. Everybody thought that that person was like white. Sometimes authors in American history and elsewhere in the world had to take on a persona, right, of being a white author because they couldn't write in their own names. Have you guys ever seen the, what's it called? The movie called The Bankers. I think it's called The Bankers with, oh God, it just came out a couple of years ago. Very, very good movie. It's called The Banker, and it's a 2020 film with, oh God, the actors, some well-known guys, actually. Let me tell you who they are. It had Anthony Mackie, Nia Long, Samuel L. Jackson. If you've not watched that movie, go check it out. But again, it's about two Black men, business partners, and it was set, this is a completely true story. 1954, you know, this guy wanted to get in real estate, but even in 1954, which was not that long ago, as a Black man, he could not own property. He could not get into real estate. He couldn't own a bank. There were so many things that he could not do. So in order for them, they were the masterminds behind it. They knew the business side of things. They knew the finances. But in order for them to make this happen, they actually had to put a white man in the front of the business, and he was the face of it. So everyone thought that he was the one buying up all these buildings in California and all these properties in Los Angeles. And eventually they found out that that was not the case. And funny enough, when it was revealed that Matt, who was the white guy, it didn't appear as what it was. Like, he actually wasn't the brain, because he screwed up. He got a little bit too greedy and made a really poor decision, and that jeopardized the entire project. And of course, when everything came falling down, who was it that was actually going to jail? The two Black guys. The white guy took a plea deal, falsely testifying that he'd been duped by Bernard and Joe. And so he basically walked, and these other guys went to jail for years of their lives, when really they had done nothing wrong. But the system at the time did not allow Black people, even in 1954, to own property, to be property investors, to be landlords, and certainly not to own banks. And it was one of the things that actually changed the history of American law, because as a result of this case, they were actually able to change the legislation, and the Fair Housing Act came out of all of this as a result. So eventually they were convicted and they served their prison time. And when they got out, they were able to move to the Bahamas is the plot line. So you guys have to read this. It's based on a true story. And it was a very, very interesting story. But again, these are the things that people don't know about in terms of what actually happened in the world. Archer, Brenda says, have you, doesn't matter what their budgets are. Clearly the government schools are suffering from the shortfall. I'm going to maybe do some research on that, Miss Brenda, because I don't actually know how much money government is giving to private institutions. But I think we need to look more at integrating our school. Like maybe that's where we start finding a solution to all of this. Debbie says, how can we expect children to learn when the people teaching them don't know any better? Some people are still living in 1950. Cece, good morning. Some people only know how to speak angry. This is the only way that they know to get through life. Live high now, but fall when karma hit you. Don't forget where you come from, laughing out loud. Soka says, when I got my green card many years ago, the woman who interviewed me in Palm Beach looked me so solemnly in the eye and said, you know, because you're from the Cayman Islands, we have to put you in our system as Black. I replied, thank you, I am Black. She appeared shocked. Oh, Soka, little does she know, right? And it's so interesting because Soka identifies herself as Black. I don't know if you guys have seen Soka, but what I would say about her is knowing a little bit again about the family dynamics. There are people who grew up in families like Soka, for example, who, you know, they would have had other family members who were a little bit fairer skinned than her, although Soka has, I don't know what hair color you got these days because she's always doing crazy colors with her hair. I think one time you're doing red and burgundy or something. But I think maybe it's naturally like a dark brown. But, you know, she could pass for white, I guess, if she wanted to. And she's saying, no, that I consider myself a person of color. And there are other people in families who, you know, got the benefit of being maybe on another side of the family, and they were all too happy to claim their whiteness. Steven says blackface was a joke, and then it became Jim Crow laws. Debbie says slave mentality still exists. Absolutely. Vernita says, say it loud. I'm Black and I'm proud. Miranda says European is the most prejudiced of all expats. An American told me she had seen Blacks for the first time in Cayman. Armenian. Oh, sorry. I thought you said American. I'm like, how can you be from America and not Armenian? Okay. I suppose people might come from certain countries where they haven't seen people of color. It's hard to understand that, but again, I've not lived in those countries, so I guess I just don't know. Anthony says there's an incredible amount of internalized racism for sure. Good morning, Siobhan says speak it. Oh yes, Siobhan says BS, like the stapler thief. Is he still here? Listen, I make no bones about it. We post stuff about people all the time on CMR, and I notice the very obvious distinction in how people respond. When the child, whether it's a child or person, is white versus when they're not. And thank you, Siobhan, for reminding us about the stapler thief. He's one of those really, really, really famous ones that showed you how incredibly ridiculous we are. If that was a story about a Jamaican or Caymanian with all facts being the same, except where they're from and their skin color, the conversation would not have been, oh, he's having a hard time in life. Oh, just take it down. Forgive him. You know, I had people messaging me about him. Oh, you don't know how rough he's had it. And I'm like, really? So rough that you have to go steal a stapler of all things? Like, are we serious? That is next level crazy. What? Huh? No. Like, seriously? But yes, I see it all the time. When it's a Caymanian, when it's a Jamaican, when it's a person of color, the conversation is very different. Oh, let me give you another example of in the context of Cayman. Remember when we did the story on Bryce Marin when he finally got out of jail and he came back and whatever? Again, the response there was treating him like a hero. He's a great guy. Oh my gosh, so wonderful. It's like, do we not understand that he was involved in money laundering, found guilty, admitted to it, trying to move drugs in and out of our country? But again, the conversation was so different because of who he was. Own it. When you own it, then that's the first step to reform, I think. Miss Sue said that her family went through so much racism back in the UK as they were mixed color. As my husband was Caymanian, we moved from the north to the south to get away from it. And the big difference once we came to Cayman in the 80s, no problem. UK is really bad with racism. So also says that many pale faces are clueless when it comes to racial sensitivity. A new fire department recruit in Florida was welcomed with watermelon and fried chicken. Oh my God. The dude that brought these things saw nothing wrong with that, completely clueless. Wow. Why would you put that in the menu? So Miranda says, blame it on our politicians about increasing population of prejudiced people who hates blacks. I don't know that we can put the blame on them. I think every single individual has to look internally at themselves and come to conclusions about what is happening and what this is really all about. You know, like we have to take responsibility for this. How many of us are prejudiced? How many Caymanians, regardless of your skin color, are prejudiced against Jamaicans, for example? I don't know if you already have that conversation on a Monday morning, but that's another truth serum that a lot of us need to swallow, right? So, you know, we have our own internal prejudices. We can't stand a Jamaican. A lot of Caymanians, that is true. Despite the fact that we're so intertwined with Jamaica. We don't want to accept that culture and that background, but that's true too. So there's a lot of prejudiceness that happens there. So Siobhan says there are too many levels of discrimination in this country, too much hatred from Caymanian to Caymanian, which also makes everyone else come here feeling okay to discriminate against us. We do it to each other. And that is very, very true. Johan admits that Cayman's pigmentocracy complex is real. Yeah. And people paying to look on getting lips plump up. Yes. Oh, yes, Vernita. Thank you for reminding us about the whole butt implants. That's a thing now. That's now a thing of beauty. But again, it was made fun of not that long ago. It was one of the things that even caricatures actually, you know, would over exaggerate when they drew women of color. Their big behinds that could carry like an entire plate of, like an entire picnic. So they made fun of their lips, their behinds, the exaggerated breasts, like all of these things. It's so funny now that a lot of people are looking to enhance those parts of the body to try and look good, because in this day and age, that's the thing. Even people of color are going and putting in implants. 20 Fuss says some Black women wear white face every time they go out. Well, again, these are people who are not comfortable in their own skin. I mean, the whole bleaching thing is ridiculous to me. I saw a picture the other day. I think it was Sunday or Saturday with this guy bleaching himself on Facebook. And someone said, well, my God, he actually looked better. Oh, let me show it to you. This is from October 29th. And people are saying, I don't know who it was in Cayman, but someone in Cayman said this guy actually looked better, darker skin. But it's so sad. The joke was he even bleached the bag because his little bag, and obviously it's not the same bag, but even the bag is now a light brown color in this one versus this one. So this is the same guy. You know, you can see based on his tattoos and everything. And people are making fun of him. And somebody commented and said, wow, he actually looked better on the left when he was what he's supposed to be, a black man, than trying to look like this. This is not attractive at all. He looks like he's some kind of like ghost. He doesn't look well. He doesn't look healthy. And the truth of the matter is, you know, you're not supposed to do this to your pigmentation. But again, the pressure is real for people to look fairer skin and brown, even at the risk of giving themselves skin cancer, premature death, and other things. And when you have children, you think that the children that come out with the bleach white look, they'll come out the same way that you did. Oh, sundown town. This is something I'm unfamiliar with. Towns in the U.S. are incredibly dangerous to drive through if you're a POC. Wow, really? I mean, they still exist? Like, I guess, probably somewhere in Mississippi. You know, I've had my own limited experiences when I lived in the States. There's an area called Riverview, Florida. Still very much Hickville in country. But my only real overt experience was actually in the capital in Tallahassee. No, I lie. It wasn't in Tallahassee. It was en route to Tallahassee. We were going to Tallahassee, but it actually happened close to Gainesville, which is a university community. All right, folks. Texas in the South, you're liable to go missing if you drive through the wrong neighborhood. Lord have mercy. Wow, that's still a thing. Pretty scary, actually. So Yohad is willing to admit that there are persons from the Cayman aristocracy and certain fraternities that get opportunities, employment, and promotions not based on ability or aptitude, but largely based on coming from the right family and the belief that Caymanian pigmentocracy better qualifies them and somehow better represent better leadership opportunities. And that is sad, he says, to look at the civil service. I would say that it's not just in the civil service, but definitely I know that it happens. And if you have a certain name, traditionally, you are in a better position to get job opportunities and to be promoted in this country than not. Are we slowly changing? Is there any hope? Soka says drove into Edmonton, Alberta with Craig years ago. And the minute we parked the car, a convertible with a bunch of white guys drove up and started screaming, "Get out of town" with the N-word. Wonder if any of that group are in Cayman for a paycheck now. Crazy. So Miranda's saying if this new government can't fix the problems that the PPM created, well, let's be very, very clear. Problems are not created overnight, and they're certainly not fixed overnight. Good morning, Ms. Rhonda. She says, thank you for all the information you put out there. Some people know these things are going on, but they keep their lips closed. And to me, that is the saddest part of all, unfortunately, is that we know what's happening and we just go along to get along. And it's easier, without a doubt, to not have this conversation. You know, it would be easier for me to sit here and never talk about anything to do with race, classism, racism, nothing. My life would be easier. But these are the realities of what we're having to deal with. And Brenda speaks the truth. Why is it that every time Caymanians discuss something that doesn't sit well with us, the response is always a threat about fallouts or pulling sponsorships, boycotting, etc.? Always happens. Miranda, I think we've put that to bed. It actually wasn't about the Leslie case. That's not why you got blocked. You got blocked about the other case, which is actually an active case. So your comments about the Leslie case had nothing to do with it. That's water under the bridge until the appeal is heard. Miss Bonnie says, I'm a woman that grew up fighting racism my whole childhood, and yet I still have friends of many races. But racist people show their true colors when they're angry, and they try to apologize. It is what it is when people wake up and recognize that people of color deserve to be recognized like everyone else. TV says, well, we know who's in the best interests of the Caymanian people. Thank God we still have Caymanians in high position. Or I feel sorry for the Caymanians that have medium or lower class families. Yes, Al, this is part of the conversation. Good hair, bad hair, light skin, black skin, you're beautiful for a black person. Bleach cream, straight hair, nappy hair, all made up foolishness to shame people, to shame some people. The irony is everything in this toxic world is by design to keep greatness down. The oppressors divide and conquer, and they did a great job on their target or black people. The brainwash is real. Most people never wake up. The oppressors live behind the gates while others fight. Magdalene. Brenda says, do you know who started these schools and why? I have no idea, to be honest, about the schools. I mean, they all have religious affiliations, which is interesting. So I don't know. I mean, enlighten me. I'd be interested to know. Yes, Al, it was a really good movie. I feel like I want to watch it again because it was a real eye opener. But you know, some movies you need to watch twice to really get the full implications of it. Darlene says, just remind people who Soka's brothers are. Elaine's Closet says, when we need to stop calling people Caribbean white, West Bay white, etc. They're considered black everywhere else, and the colorism issue among Caribbean people is a real and divisive thing even today. Morning, Gadiel. How are you? Haven't seen you in a minute. No, I don't dye my hair. I thought you had reddish hair one time. That was your natural color? Has it changed over the years? She says, my hair is brown, and when I was in the sun a lot, the sun would bleach it out a bit, but no dyes. Oh, okay. I used a henna once as a teen. That was a long time ago. Yeah, I thought for some reason you had reddish color in your hair. Maybe that was just my imagination then. Siobhan says, but we locking Caymanians up hand over fist if they steal food. Baliki says, in Singapore, I believe by law, neighborhoods have to be 1/3 Malay, 1/3 Indian, 1/3 Chinese. So they're forcing diversity. Not feasible in Cayman, but some things can be done to avoid apartheid light in future. It's crazy. How can we have apartheid in our own country? We are Caribbean people. Like, to me, that just even sounds crazy. Alice's growing up and going to church in Cayman, they had a white side and a black side to sit. When I got sensible and questioned it, I was told that's how it is. Wow. Andrea says bullseye, and ask half the people who hate Jamaicans. They don't even know why. They just don't. Brenda says, Sue, remember when they marched in the streets of England chanting there's no black in the Union Jack? I don't remember that. That must have been before my time, but what a mess. Siobhan says, look at that crook Rob Aspinall. Which one was he? Gosh, there's so many of them. I can't keep up. He got less jail time for his guilty plea, and he moved on to Caymanian status, and his wife runs one of the most successful recruitment agencies, and he's playing Mr. Mom. Then look about Ryan Schroeder, who got caught with cocaine. He got off scot-free, went back to the States with 0 charges, yet locking up her own Caymanian young man for a spliff. Yes, I do remember that case, that last one about the cocaine, because he was for many, many years reaching out to CMR about why we should take the story down. And we were like, no, why? I'm like, if I have to take your story down, then we take them all down. Like, that doesn't make any sense. We don't do that. On what basis? And Siobhan is absolutely right when you say that they were able to sort of whitewash his situation, where he basically got a slap on the wrist, even within the Cayman Islands. And then he went overseas. Remember, he still went overseas and stole money from a taxi, which was like some kind of larceny, aggravated larceny, whatever, and basically got away with that too. And, you know, let us be very, very clear that even the judicial system has prejudices built into it. And if that isn't obvious, I don't know what to tell you. One of the cases that I brought up during my sentencing hearing, because of course the DPP, Canadian lady from Saskatchewan, was arguing that I should go to jail for a podcast show and comments about a particular individual, which everyone in this community knows their reputation. And they said the truth wasn't what was on trial. Compare that to, and I said, you know, it's so crazy that she'd be arguing jail time for this. No one in the Cayman Islands has ever gone to jail for an ICTA offense, except 2 cases with child molesters, because they couldn't get them on the primary offense. The only thing that they had was the ICT offense. One was the coach there, whatever the heck his name is, the Trinity coach, who was sexting this girl over 400 times. And because they couldn't get him on the primary offense, the judge said, well, these text messages, which was a form of harassment, was extremely egregious, asking a teenager to show her parts to him and come and sit on his you-know-what and all this kind of foolishness. So he got convicted on that because they couldn't get him on anything else. And then the other one was some guy who I think it might have been another child molester case or a murder case or something ridiculous. And yet she's sitting there arguing that I must be held to the same standard as those individuals. Now, I found a case. I forget what the girl's name is now, but I could certainly look it up. White lady from Canada who was in there for an ICT offense, but she had a long list of other offenses as well. Property damage, because she went to the ex's house and broke up his front door, threatened to kill the dog, did harm to the dog, mashed up his car, all these other things in addition to the ICT offense. And I actually got more of a sentence than she did. Have it make sense. Jessica, what was her name? Jessica, oh God, what the hell's her name? I've got the case ready. Jessica Swindammer. Yes. This is what she had. Damage to property, 2 counts, causing fear or provocation of violence, using an ICT network to abuse, annoy, harass, 2 counts, attempting to obstruct the course of justice. So she had 6 things in total, right? And this woman did not face anywhere near the actual outcome that I did for a single ICT offense. Now, y'all need to look at me and tell me what's really going on here. And yet, this white lady from Canada is going to sit up there talking about why I should go to jail. That's the reason why even the judge was like, nobody's going to jail here. Like, that was a preposterous argument and position for the DPP to be taken. You have people showing up in court, folks. Here, just in case you don't believe me, there's Jessica Swindammer, or whatever the heck her name is. Mash up the man front door, threaten the underage children, all this kind of stuff. Darlene Oku could not point to a singular ICT offense where anyone had ever gone to jail. But here she was arguing that at the end of the day, you know, this had somehow been elevated to that level. Really? Wow. Good morning, Amjad. Natasha says they were gunning for you every time you state that you beat the courts, put a target on your back. Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. That's the reality of it. And you know what is so funny? Every single time that they come after me now, I've noticed something of interest. They can't send any of the Caribbean members of the DPP's office to do the job. So we have an appeal coming out, and I don't even know who this guy is, but I'll tell you why he's not a Caribbean member of the DPP. Because I don't think any of them even want to be involved in this. Maybe they're starting to see the unfairness of the entire situation. This person says, good morning, Sandra. Your subject today tells us one important thing, that it's time for us to reset, think of one for all and all for one. Another parent says, my 8-year-old daughter used to say, I'm not black, mom, I'm brown. And I had to sit her down and explain to her that all black people, no matter the shade of brown, we're all black people, no matter the shade of brown that we are. So someone else shared in reference to blackface, the realities of maybe why some people still don't get it, but it has been something that has been, entrenched in our community for a very long time. So, wow, have a look at this picture. I don't know where this is from, where this would possibly be accepted in the world. But there you go. Like I said, it's a popular Halloween costume. All right, folks. Do not forget, please, that I'm going to share this NPR article here. Thank you so much for that. Do not forget, folks, that tomorrow we're having another edition of the CMR COVID Spotlight Series. Kevin Watler has been doing a fantastic job with these. And I don't even know when they're going to end because there's so many interesting topics around COVID. But on Tuesday's Spotlight Series, public health experts will discuss living with COVID. So we're going to have tips for businesses and families. So you definitely do not want to miss this. They're going to share what businesses and families should be doing now to prepare. So please make sure that you tune in for that at 7 o'clock on Tuesday. Now, I have reached out, folks, to both public health and the HSA because over the weekend, I got a lot of questions about the COVID regulations. What do you do if you're positive? People trying to understand lateral flow tests and all these other things. And, there's a lot of confusion around it. So we have invited them to come on the program. Hopefully they will do so. And we can then take it from there. A lot of questions. A lot of you have questions. So Ms. Darlene says, Sandy came and has it bad. I remember when I was working at Customs, a passenger was so surprised that she saw Black people. She said, I didn't know there were Black people here. I had to bite my tongue and count to 10. Who comes to the Caribbean and thinks that there's no Black people here? Child, that's crazy. But again, maybe it speaks more to what a horrible job. Someone's asking, who do you contact at public health to report someone not complying with quarantine? Well, as far as I know, it's still the police that want that information. So they said to call 911, apparently. Oh, what a hot mess. I just had somebody else message. talking about even someone in her family who wants to believe that they are, that they're white. Child, please. Anyway, folks, again, I want to make it very, very clear. The young lady in this situation was not doing what was said by the video that she was doing, and the perception was completely wrong. And I think, we all owe her an apology for interpreting the behavior in that way. And I want to be very, very clear. Our comments were never directed at the child. We were always wondering, well, where are the adults in this situation, if this is what it was? And in fact, the way in which it was worded up to the very end said, what am I seeing here? Right? Because I even question, is this right? What am I actually seeing here? So I hope that everyone in this community will walk away from this. I mean, from our perspective, we've obviously learned a very important lesson that even if someone sends you something and they've come to a conclusion that may not actually be what is actually happening in a given situation. The bigger discourse at PrEP, I hope that they will open up their minds to the possibility that everything is not as kosher as they think it is in their own school. Maybe they need to go past International Languages Day and really open up the dialogue and the conversation within their own student body and encourage students and parents to bring their concerns in a meaningful way to the administration with a view to like sitting down and having a conversation. Right? If we can't even talk about it, nothing will ever change. All right. Yeah, people breaching quarantine all over the place. We will try to find out more about that, but we had a few breaches over the weekend and stuff as well. Folks, if you have a positive in your house, you need to stay put. You need to remain in your household until everyone has been cleared. And that might mean that you're locked up for a little while. So the other thing, folks, is we have a number of individuals who are finding themselves in a very unusual situation because of COVID. So over the weekend, a young mother and her 2 children were urgently trying to find a place to go because she was living with a family member and one of her kids tested positive, and they were like, get out. I don't want a positive in my house. And I thought, oh my God. So she was scrambling on Saturday afternoon trying to find a place to go with her kids. What? Yeah, because her parent was like, get out of my house. But which is already stupid, because if you've been in the house with the kids, from the second they test positive, you should also be isolating, daddy, because you might have already been exposed. So that kind of doesn't make any sense. There are also people, and we're going to talk about this maybe tomorrow as a fuller topic, but there are people who are being forced to not even tell their family members that they're getting vaccinated because their family members are getting violent with them because they're choosing to get vaccinated. This is a real thing. Anyway, we will talk about those topics tomorrow. Thank you, Ms. Carol. About lateral flow tests. And of course, there seems to be a shortage of lateral flow tests. There are questions about, how lateral flow tests will be implemented. Al says, I found out I'm a positive person. Does that mean COVID positive or just positive in general? With Al, I've always got to be very careful with his comments because he'll throw you off with a remark. He doesn't specifically say he's COVID positive. He just says I'm a positive person. So I got to beg the question, Al, are we talking about COVID here or something else? A lot of people are now going to be positive, folks. You know, at the end of the day, I just got some messages this morning. So another person has said a child from year 4C just tested positive. So let me just see. It says, good afternoon, parents. A child from year 5A just tested positive. I don't know what school this is, by the way. Let me ask. As such, I'm asking all parents of 5A to test their children before sending them to school. Only children who have a negative test must come to school. I will send home lateral flow tests with children who return the request form. They get 10 days worth. Parents are to test their children for 10 days. And then a child from year 4C also tested positive. And again, they're sending home lateral flow tests. Well, hopefully they've got enough of those on order, because trust me, it seems like they are really, really running out. So very, very interesting. Yep. All right. Thank you. Flashpoint says the father or fathers or children should provide shelter for the children's child. Flashpoint, if you only knew. That father has like 10 other children all over the place. So unfortunately, the father's in no position. Al says no with COVID. Or you're tested positive. Well, listen, lots of people are tested positive. We are looking into a story. We're still waiting on the officials to get back to us on this one. We've had a number of prison inmates, maybe we'll talk about this tomorrow, who have contacted us about the situation at the prison. So we understand that at least 17 inmates and have tested positive, and they're concerned. Now, obviously, inmates are in a very, very tricky situation because they don't have the choice to say, oh, I can go and isolate on my own. They're in a prison system. Oh, Elaine, we haven't done the court updates yet. Gosh, I better do that then. So I'm waiting to hear before I can say anything more on what's happening at the prison, what the official position is. We've asked for some numbers to confirm how many people are tested positive. The prisoners themselves are saying at least 17 of them so far, and we need to know what the protocols are given the restrictions. I'm hearing that there's issues with, employees not following proper protocol when it comes to COVID prevention or detection and try to prevent it. And so we're going to get some of that information. All right, court updates. Let's do that, and then we can certainly, end the show on that note. So let me be very clear here. There's a couple court cases that we are monitoring. In fact, let me just log into the judicial website and I'll tell you. There's a few more that we have to report on. It takes a while to do these court cases because oftentimes they are very much, they're not the easiest thing in the world, first of all, to understand. And so it does require breaking them down a bit, right? So we try to, I'm going to just show you guys this website here. We try to keep up with the court cases and report the ones that we think are of interest to the community. So some of the broader community issues. So allow me to show you what's been going on lately. So a lot of these corporate ones, sometimes they're interesting if you're in company law, but most of you could care less about those types of cases. It's more the community cases or criminal cases or immigration cases. So we do have one. Here's the Attorney General versus Belika. Belika, we need to delve into that one. It's more than one case here. And so we need to understand what those judgments are, but those are civil cases that have come down. Belika, no doubt, says that they have some broader application. Here's one with Alejandro Ruiz Ambrez against the Attorney General and the Immigration Tribunal. His application for RERC Point system looks like he had an issue there, so we need to have a look at that. Here's a trustee case, financial services division. Most people are not too into the financial services ones, but we keep an eye on those because sometimes there might be something of interest going on there. There's like estate cases. Here's the one with Crosby eBanks. We covered that one already. Here's Intertrust and Exima. This is a final judgment. So very, very interesting cases. Some of these are like winding up petitions and stuff like that. But in the last batch, we had 2 cases with Katina Anglin, which we covered over the weekend. This corporate case is creditors winding up again, not normally of public interest. So we'll look at Mr. Belika's cases next, and definitely this one with the Immigration Tribunal, because it'll be interesting to see, because this is something that could have some implications as it relates to the immigration law. So we'll have a look at what the courts are saying there. But the 2 that we covered over the weekend, let me just summarize for you. The first one was Katina Anglin versus the Director of Legal Aid. So this was a case where Katina Anglin had essentially sued the legal aid, the Director of Legal Aid, saying that she should not have to contribute to her legal aid application or her legal aid certificate. Because when they issue legal aid, they issue like a certificate is what they call it, which is your official authorization that you've gotten legal aid. Normally, when you apply for legal aid, you do have to indicate who the attorney is that's going to be representing you, et cetera, right? So, it's very much, in the public eye. Now, what was interesting about this case? I mean, it was 17 pages or something, and it's very hard to take a 17-page judgment, which does look at a lot of sort of factual things, and then try to dissect that into a story that is not really protracted and too long, where the average person even loses interest in the story. So that's the difficulty of it, folks. And that, that's what we have to try to do, right? So in this instance, what I can tell you is that she'd applied for legal aid. She had been granted legal aid, and then she got numerous extensions of the legal aid. So initially they applied for like a certain amount that was approved. And then lawyers do this all the time. They keep coming back, oh, it's going to cost more and more of the people's money. And of course, the process is the Director of Legal Aid has to review it with a view to see if there's justification of continuing to pay out this money. Now, the legal aid fund is public funds, folks. So there is some responsibility, I suppose, that goes there to make sure that it's spent in a fair manner. Normally, there's a presumption, I should say, of entitlement to legal aid if it's a criminal case of a certain caliber, so like murder cases and that sort of thing. But despite that, you still have to apply. So it's not something that you automatically get. There is an application process, and in the application process, they will ask you for a number of different things, including bank account information for the past 3 months. So, you've got to be honest with the legal aid system, because I think it's probably an offense to lie to them as well. And so they want you to actually show them your bank statements. And they're going to be looking to see what you're spending your money on. You have to give them a list of expenses, your income and expenses on a monthly basis. And they even go as far as, if you are married, they want that information on your spouse as well, which is really, really interesting, because your spouse might not be contributing to your case, or, what I mean? It's kind of weird, but there's that expectation that your spouse's business is, their business as well. So it's super interesting. They do want a considerable amount of money and proof, not money, but information and proof that, what you're saying is true. So in this case, she submitted a legal aid application. This is where she's actually, Miss Brenda, that's a hot topic for sure. Yes. she submitted an application for legal aid, and this is her suing the governor because he exercised his what he says is his discretionary power under Section 81 of the Constitution in relation to the what's it called now? Let me tell you what it's called. Of the Civil Partnership Act 2020. So this is when he said, all right, government can't do it. I'm going to do it for the people. So she's basically suing him, claiming that he misused his powers under Section 81 of Schedule 2 of the Cayman Islands Constitution Order. Obviously, this is a point of public interest for more reasons than one. And we're all keenly watching this case. So what she did was she got her application approved initially. The directive legal aid said it would be capped at $8,500 for the initial stages of the lawsuit, right? And then her lawyer, as lawyers do, came back asking for more money. So they requested an extension of legal aid, claiming that they had to engage the services of a Queen's Counsel. Now, you know, Queen Counsels don't come cheap, honey. Some of them will not step foot in Cayman for less than probably $50,000 to $100,000 easily. They ain't coming here for no chump change to lend their constitutional expertise to a conversation. So they can come at a hefty price. And oftentimes local attorneys will engage the services of a Queen Counsel because they don't have the expertise in that area to really make the necessary legal arguments, but they come at a pretty penny. And so they went back and said that they needed an extension. So another $8,000 was approved. Now, Katina Anglin has set up an organization called the Christian Association for Civics and Political Education. And this was a point that the judge had to consider about what this organization is and what the remit of this organization is. So apparently the very purpose of this organization and when it was set up was in order to receive contributions, she said, to fight this case on behalf of the people. So she was getting donations to this nonprofit. So she set up this nonprofit and she's been asking people for donations and getting donations in order to fight the LGBT, Civil Partnership Act that is now in place and put in place by the governor. And she's marched against this issue. Everybody knows her position against the LGBTQ plus community. So she had at one point over $8,000 in the bank account. She was told that she had to pay a contribution initially of $4,000. And she was able to do that in monthly installments of $500. It's not even like, it was like $4,000 one time, although the NPO account had over $8,100 in it. So she made her contribution, the first contribution. Then she got another extension, it looks like, which she agreed to the terms of that legal aid order agreement in October of 2020. She was granted leave in November 2020 for judicial review against the governor. In March of 2021, her attorneys came back asking for more money again. So they wanted another extension on, the initial legal aid application, and said, that this whole case is of significant public importance. And they were arguing, there was no argument, this is important, about the appropriateness of the contribution at the time. So she actually signed on to, she actually signed, she actually, because they make you sign to agree to the terms of it. So she actually signed that and said, yep, no problem. My apologies. Respond to something here. Right. So, so she signed that agreement that she would pay it. Now, apparently at some point she changed her mind. So again, they extended the legal aid. Now they've capped it at $20,000 for junior counsel. And I don't even know if they can cap it at anything for QC, because like I said, they come at a pretty penny normally, right? So she had put up a post saying that at some point she was looking for donations. And then when she went back to the legal aid in May of 2021, like the deadline for her to pay was coming up. I think they gave her a late deadline in May. Then she comes back and she said, I've not made a new appeal for donations, nor have I received any new donations for this purpose, although I have received donations for education purpose. And this is something that the judge in his decision struggled with, because he was like, how do you prove what the donation was for? Because on the deposit slip, it only said donation. Right? It didn't say anything about, it's donation just for this or whatever. So now the judge is a little bit confused. And his confusion stems from the fact that the account was actually set up for the purposes of this fight. Now she's claiming that there's some other educational purposes, I don't even know what that means, that, is being included in the remit of this organization. So it's a little bit strange. But that was her explanation that she gave to the court's office, that, she was collecting additional money, but it wasn't for the purposes of this lawsuit. So Darlene Oku now is over in the legal aid's office. She's their legal counsel. So she went digging on social media, as Darlene enjoys doing. And she pointed out that the social media post requesting donations for public funds was still very much visible. And so people still had an opportunity to be donating on that basis. So it's not something that had been taken down. So although Katina was saying that she'd not made a fresh appeal, whatever, the original appeal in time, I guess, was still very, very much visible. People could be seeing that and making a donation to the cause. And so she noted that it said donation. It made no mention of anything about an educational purpose. And again, I don't even know what an educational purpose, what that means. I think at some point the judge said something about looking at the constitution of the NPO to see, what documents, when she registered it, what was the purpose of the NPO as well, is something that they might want to have a look at. Anyway, basically, in their investigations, they find out that Katina has $55,000 in a credit union account, which came from the sale of property and from two other sources of employment income, and that she was also receiving the tourism stipend from the government. So she's receiving, in their mind, some contribution. They had reduced it, by the way, from the initial contribution of $5,000. She had appealed that amount. They reduced it down to $4,000. And obviously, based on what they had done previously, it seems like they would also give her terms to pay it. So it's not like she had to pay the $4,000 at a single time, right? So at the last minute, she kind of appealed that she'd have to pay anything at all. And so the judge found that in the circumstances, based on what he was looking at, he could not find in her favor. It came down to a couple legal issues. So one of the legal issues was when she got the extension, right? She's arguing, quite cleverly, I might add, that amounted to a variation. So there is a difference in contrast between an extension and a variation. And a variation would almost be like a completely new agreement. So she's claiming that it was a variation and not an extension. And obviously the Director of Legal Aid's representative would have been arguing the opposite. And so the judge found that he did not consider the $4,000 contribution condition to be a variation. And then she was also saying that if it was a variation, the court had jurisdiction over the matter by way of an appeal. So, these lawyers get so fancy with the things that they try to do. And he also noted that the Director of Legal Aid has always indicated that a contribution would be required. And so it wasn't even something that was introduced with the granting of the extension. Because remember, she already had paid one contribution for the initial grant. And so, the her civic association still has over $4,000 in the bank and still, by all accounts, is collecting money. And so the judge said that he also refused, this was Justice Williams, to find that by reducing the amount in Anglin's favor, that this should allow her the right to appeal the decision, which would not have existed otherwise. So she then used the fact that she'd gotten a reduction as another legal argument on why she should be able to appeal it. So it's like they were trying to help her by reducing it, and then she turned around and used that to make a legal argument. What a hot mess. Anyway, he concluded that the money in the bank account should count towards her income for the purposes of assessing her legal aid contribution. And he noted that it would be wrong for her to have access to such funds if they exist and retain them in the CACPE, her long Christian Association name, account, rather than contributing those funds as intended by the donors to the publicly funded legal aid fund. Because that's why people are giving the money. So the judge is like, hold on, why would you want to just hold on to this money? This is what you collected the money for. And she's arguing that it's for educational purposes. Well, I don't know who her donors are, and I don't know how they feel about that. But the thing that occurred to me is that what I thought was very, very interesting about this is we've seen this situation and this conversation come up before, where NPOs collect money and they seem to do whatever they want with it, right? There is no controls over what they're doing. There's no audits that are happening. There's no accountability that's happening from these individuals. It becomes a little bit of a free-for-all. They can do whatever they want. And this creates some very, very interesting situations. And I think it creates an interesting situation when you are also the donor. Like, you need to be aware that people who are the people who are you need to be aware that, as a person who is giving out money, that you need to know exactly what it is that you are giving it out for. So it's and that you trust the people that you give the money to, especially when there is going to be no accountability. Absolutely ridiculous, if you ask me. And I know people who have given money to her, again, claiming that it would be for one thing, and then they end up afterwards wondering if that's what it was really for. Like, they have no idea. So interesting. That was the first case. There was another case relating to Katina and her lawsuit, whereby essentially the other nonprofit group called Colors came in, which represents the LGBTQ plus community. They wanted to be able to participate in the proceeding. So it's coming up the end of December, or the beginning of December. I think it's the 2nd and 3rd of December. And they're going to be participating in those proceedings. And so they had to apply to be added as what's called a, oh God, what's the technical word for it? Hold on, let me think about what the word is now. Let me tell you what it is. Colors came in. So the term is an intervener, right? So they want the opportunity to address the court. It's been limited to 1 hour. That's what they were requesting. And so Katina had argued through her lawyers that they should not be able to present any evidence or oral evidence or evidence. But she was happy to, and she kind of changed her position. The judge said her position changed to what they were saying that day versus what it was before. So he was a little bit confused about that. But nonetheless, she was still making the judge be forced to, because he said, can you guys not go and agree to this? And that wasn't the case. So she was objecting in the end to them making oral submissions or relying on any written evidence. So the judge just said, listen, Colors Cayman represents the very community that whatever decision this court makes will impact directly, without a doubt. And so they deserve a say in the proceedings. So they didn't bring the proceedings. The defendant, which would be the governor and his representatives, had no issues with them having a say in the proceedings. Katina had an issue with it. And so the judge had to consider this application, the summons, on behalf of Colors Cayman. And essentially what the judge ruled is that, yes, they obviously can bring things to the table that would tell us how this community would be uniquely impacted by any decision that we make, especially if we find in the plaintiff's favor. So if we find, in the favor of Katina Anglin, whatever the outcome is, it would have an impact on those individuals. And they are in a unique position, given who they are, to be able to provide us with insight into how that would impact that community. And so he felt like they had a right as a third party intervener to be at the table. And of course, he had to consider, third party interventions. He said, are a method by which a person or organization not otherwise involved in the litigation may submit specialist information or expertise to the court. And he said that this was really an important process that offered a route by which such an organization can make an effective contribution to the court's decision-making process. And having considered the application its own merits, he was satisfied that Colors Caribbean is a proper person to be heard. In law, there's people who have locus standi, who have standing, and this is almost an extension of that principle, whether or not they have standing to participate in the conversation, in the legal conversation. And so he said that at the end of the day that they did, and this concept of being a proper person to be heard was something that he had to really, really consider. So basically, she kind of lost two cases really in one go. And, the judge found against her with the contribution, and he also found against her as it relates to Colors Cayman, because she was objecting to them. And he's limiting it to 1 hour, and said, listen, it's going to be 1 hour. The counsel for the governor's side has agreed, so that there's no duplication of any arguments, that they would work with the attorneys for Colors Caribbean, I think is what it's called. It's no longer Colors Cayman, Colors Caribbean. And that they would work together to ensure that there was no duplication of legal arguments or wasting the court's time and that sort of thing. So he accepted that that was a fair proposition. They're limited to 1 hour of a 2-day hearing. And he felt like that was not something that would unduly inconvenience either side in relation to that. So Darlene says she got knocked. Elizabeth says, hola, buenos dias. Buenos dias, Elizabeth. Hi, Larry. Rhonda says, all in the name of I'm a Christian. Well, the same God that made her made the gay persons. That money would have better use for people. That money would have been better used for people that have children living in bad conditions without food, yet they call themselves Christian. Yeah. It's crazy to me, to be honest, Miss Rhonda. And, but they have these legal rights that we can't deny them, because, one day we might want to challenge the government or the governor, whatever. So the broader picture is people should have the ability to sue even their own government. And there's nothing wrong with that. But yes, I think that the underlying issues that are brought up in this are indeed very, very interesting. And it really comes down to hate for a group of people. Let us be very, very honest what this is really all about. At first they were arguing no marriage. Marriage is between a man and a woman. That's something sacred and blah, blah, blah. And the governor hasn't changed the definition of marriage in the Cayman Islands. What he has done, he's extended the rights to a new act called the Civil Partnership Act, which isn't a marriage, and still this, I guess in practical terms, it's like a marriage ceremony in that it gives them certain rights. And yeah, that's just not, it still is going to fly for them. It is still very much a problem. I don't know. So Ms. Brenda reminds us that there's no audit unless the funds are in excess of $50,000. Which again, anyone who gives money to a nonprofit organization, I think they need to be mindful and careful of that. And they need to know that they can trust people. And what I would say, folks, is that you cannot trust everyone. So, especially with money. And the fact that she couldn't give the court or even the legal aids department a account of what had been taken in, I thought was very, very interesting. Listen, even myself, I have had you guys contribute when I was fined in my criminal lawsuit. I had a number of you contribute donated funds to that. And believe me when I tell you, I've got my little piece of paper here still. I wrote down every name and contribution that people made. The vast majority of it I paid myself, but whoever made a contribution, I wrote it down, and it is what it is, right? I think that's the proper way. And I hadn't set up a nonprofit, and I didn't have a specific bank account. This was just people saying, hey, Sandy, we want to help out and we want to donate to the cause. And so I think there's a degree of responsibility when you're dealing with donated funds, and when other people are giving you funds for something, you've got to make sure that there's no commingling of funds and you're actually using it for the intended purpose. That's extremely, extremely important, because that to me, that's just a level of honesty. Like if you give me $5, like if I put out a plea, there's a mother in need, and you say to me, okay, Sandy, I want to donate $5 to that mother. If another mother comes forward and another situation occurs, I can't take your $5 donation, sorry, and put it to another person, another cause, because that wasn't the agreement. That's not what you gave it for. Recently, I had people donate gift cards and gift certificates, to people who were in quarantine and were in need. Now, what if I had taken those funds or those gift cards and go use them to buy my own groceries at Foster's? You know what I mean? Like, you have to trust people. And unfortunately, because a lot of people cannot be trusted, this is where you find you're going to have a problem. Okay. Someone says that the government needs to dig into these NPOs. For example, yes, child. Other NPOs to be named. Let me see. Another comment says, great show this morning. I'm now just getting the time to start watching, but I'm so glad that you addressed this today. It's an issue and will be until we start putting our people first. Okay. So new cases at Red Bay. I heard there's new cases at Georgetown Primary. Folks, the cases are here to stay as it relates to COVID. I think what we need to be mindful of really is the hospitalizations. That seems to be what the government is going to be monitoring. And, it is what it is. All right, good folks. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We talk about all sorts of very interesting things on this program. Some are uncomfortable, and just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean that it shouldn't be talked about or that it's not an issue. So Ms. Brenda is asking us to talk about quarantine facilities. We can have that conversation because I know a lot of private quarantine facilities have been taking advantage of people in a really, really big way. Now, please contact Kevin Watler. Kevin, as you guys know, has been working on our COVID Spotlight series, and he wants to talk about people who have actually experienced COVID. So if you have COVID currently or you've recovered from COVID, Kevin is interested in speaking with you. We had posted it up on the website. He hasn't had any responses yet. So if you're interested, please contact Kevin. We need to normalize this. COVID is not some plague that you have to hide away from and you have to pretend like you don't have it. It is what it is, folks. I would encourage you all to reach out to Kevin. Let us know if you've been impacted by COVID and share what your personal experiences are, because he'd like to conduct some interviews. Kevin is probably one of those things, as with a lot of things in Cayman. That you're probably going to find it difficult to find people who, are available to do it, just because they're typical Caymanians, don't want to talk about it, don't want to get involved, that sort of thing, although we're all dealing with it in a real way. So I don't know. Thank you, Miss Evelyn. Thank you, Brenda. Tommy says thanks too. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And we'll catch you guys tomorrow morning at 7:30ish. And you guys have a wonderful day. Looks like we're in for a rainy day. I hear thunder rolling in the background. No heavy rain yet, but I see it coming. Cloudy skies. And that's the kind of day that we're in for today. So take your umbrellas with you and stay safe.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of The Cold Hard Truth. Make sure to check Facebook for showtimes and more information and the latest news at CaymanMarlRoad.com. Subscribe to our IG and Facebook pages to get the latest happenings.